David woke up just before dawn to discover a bag full of snacks in his vestibule. He had met a couple of gentlemen who were finishing a section hike to the border and back the night before. The gentlemen had shared the tent site with him. They must have figured that since they were heading south to civilization that day, and Dave was hiking all the way to Canada, he would appreciate the extra calories. Well, the snacks weren't the type that Dave would normally consume, so all he could think about was the extra weight. This day was going to be an easy one. I wouldn't arrive in Canada at Manning Provincial Park until the next day, so he picked the last campsite before the border as his destination. It was just 20 miles. Far Out comments had mentioned beautiful wildflowers just a couple of weeks earlier, but the grass seemed to be already taking on the colors of fall. The summer is very short this far north. At a water source, Dave met a young lady heading south. He congratulated her on her achievement. He was still thinking about the, quote, gift, unquote, he'd discovered in his vestibule that morning. He found it perplexing, so he asked her about it. She, too, thought it was perplexing, but she liked some of the goodies. Fortunately, she decided to grab the bag and snack on them on her way to Hart's Pass. Later that day, he thought he finally snapped a picture of a pika. They are so small, shy, and fast that they are hard to capture. In a YouTube short comment, someone said it was a marmot, but it doesn't look like a marmot to him. Of course, it's hard to find pictures of baby marmots to compare it to. Who knows? What do you think? The rest of the day, he'd play Where's the Canadian Border whenever he got to a vista. It's out there somewhere. He ended the day where the Pacific Northwest Trail, another long-distance trail, crosses the PCT. Someone drew a homemade mile marker with rocks at the junction. He was at camp with his tent up and eating dinner by 5 p.m. Before 6 p.m., he was in his sleeping bag like a little kid on Christmas Eve, just willing for the next day to arrive already. Despite the early night, he did not have an early morning. No reason to rush, really. I told him that I wouldn't get to Manning Provincial Park until 2 or 3. He had only 4 miles to get to the border and then another 7 miles to get to me. So he started with a leisurely cup of coffee in the vestibule before he had a 2-mile hike to the next water source. At the water source around 8 a.m., he had a delicious breakfast of biscuits and gravy. With every turn of the trail, he was sure he'd be able to see the monument. Eventually, he came to the correct turn, and there it was. A group of hikers were there when he arrived. He had some embarrassing stuff he wanted to record at the monument. He was brave enough to record tagging the border with an audience. The rest of the stuff he wanted to do alone. While he waited for the area to clear out, he wrote in the log and he had a snack. Looking at the recent logs, he saw entries from people he knew, or sort of knew, like Skriegel, Sunny D, and the Codgers. The most notable entry was Peter's, aka Tall Boys. His entry was quite moving. David wished that his was as good. However, this was not really Dave's ending point. Going back down and finishing the Sierras weighed heavily on his mind. He still had time, so he recorded the tree break right at the border. Finally alone, he got busy being silly. He recorded an outro for Good Mythical Morning. Unfortunately, they haven't used it.
Hi, I'm David. This is the monument, the Canadian terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail. I started hiking it 6 months ago. 2,650 miles that way at the Mexican border. And now it's time to spin the wheel of mythicality.
All told, he spent well over an hour absorbing the border vibe before moving on. At the first campsite on the Canadian side, he spotted a bear box that a bear had tried to get into. Just a minute before I met him on the trail, a bald eagle buzzed him as he crossed a bridge over the Similkameen River. The experience occurred way too quickly to capture on his phone, but it was still remarkable. We had a late lunch at 4 p.m. at the Manning Provincial Park Resort, where Dave had some Canadian whiskey with a Canadian beer chaser. Then, just before closing time, we had dinner, during which he had some more Canadian whiskey with another Canadian beer chaser. After dinner, we discovered a plaque about the founding of the park. The next morning, we explored the resort some more before heading home.
Welcome to the United States of America.
Trail stop checklist. U.S.-Canada border. Check.